Welcome to the Mason Duchatschek Show. This episode is brought to you by Workforce Alchemy, helping leaders improve hiring, engagement, and retention while uncovering people-related profit leaks hidden in everyday operations. Today's guest is Luna Battalia. She's a seasoned brand strategist, designer, and leadership mentor who partners with purpose-driven organizations to clarify their core message, strengthen their brand presence, and deepen audience connection. Luna brings over a decade of experience helping leaders express their why through strategic messaging, visual identity, and holistic brand strategy, all designed to support sustainable impact and growth. She helps organizations articulate their vision, streamline communication, and build cohesive experiences that attract and retain the right audiences. Whether it's refining voice, visual identity, or strategic business direction, Luna's approach blends strategy with human-centered insight to help leaders lead with clarity and confidence. Luna, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So I know we're kind of on a tight schedule, which we always are, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump right in.
Yeah.
When executives think of branding, they often focus on logos or campaigns. I know that you emphasize messaging first. Why is message clarity foundational to organizational success?
Love this. So the messaging is always the foundation. It's always where we begin because the message is where the emotions really come through. Yes, colors and imagery can evoke emotions, but I find that the story you're telling, the deep understanding of the desires that your audience has or challenges that they're experiencing, along with the founder's motivation or the brand's mission and the values, those get expressed. And what I have found is when people kind of, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like puzzle piece or piecemeal their branding, and they do copywriting and messaging with one person, and they do visual branding, and they're like, oh, my friend, just she's got a great design eye and she put this logo together for me. And then this person's doing the website. None of those people are talking to each other and connecting. And a lot of people kind of get colors and logos and things like that and fonts, and then they come back and do messaging, and the messaging has archetypes. It has what the brand's personality, the tone, the expression, the values, the mission, all of these pieces. And you can see that if you kind of just create a color story and logos and fonts, and then you get to the emotional stuff later, and you're like, oh, I like this. Maybe the founder likes these things, likes these colors, likes these fonts, but they don't really communicate or evoke a sense of, say the brand has a sense of maturity or sage or wisdom or elder. And then the fonts are kind of playful and light, and the color story is like bright. Those things are incongruent. And so when I have people who build visual websites and then come back and they think they can just input copywriting later, and I always say that copy informs design. And so the copy and the message are the core thing that wants to be communicated. That's what evokes emotion. And everything else is supplementally supporting that message being heard, because words are really what convert more than anything.
Okay, cool. In your opinion, how does strategic brand design influence customer perception and long-term loyalty beyond just looking pretty?
Yeah, I think that when we're designing in a strategic way, it's that brand strategy has to do with all the pieces. So a lot of times as a brand evolves, things might change, the visuals might change, but if the brand has a sense of consistency in its presence, in its expression, in the way it makes people feel, in its noticeability, or what I call being unignorable, and that kind of factor stays the same, then people are excited about the visual evolution. They're not thrown off by it. They're excited to grow with the brand. And so I think when you do it strategically, it's really about when I look at messaging, it's four parts. And I know we're talking about visuals, but the message is the foundations, which is motivation, mission, values, these kind of like standard things that everything is built on. Then it's personality, expression, archetypes, tone. Then it's all about the audience, demo and psychographics, primarily psychographics. And then the fourth part is storytelling. And that's what I think of as part A and part B communicating with each other. And so that storytelling has to be the consistent thread. You're telling the same story again and again and again in different words in different ways. And so the visual branding, it's important that it evokes the same emotions that the story is intending to evoke or tell or elicit within the reader or the audience. And so if the client's desire is primarily they really need a sense of hopefulness. They're desperate, they're down and out. They really are at the end of their rope. They need some quality of hope. Okay. So then all the messaging, all the visuals, the website, everything, the story is intending to elicit hope. So for me, the strategy is almost always based visual strategy as well as any type of brand strategy is always based on what are the emotions that the audience wants to feel. Sometimes what they want and what they need are different things. Or
Can you
sometimes
expound on that a bit?
yeah, and the second part of that I was gonna share is, like, sometimes what we want for them as the brand and what they want for themselves or they think they need are different. So, for my clients, a lot of them feel like they need strategy. I work with primarily service-based entrepreneurs who have a personal brand. So their presence, they might be podcasters, their presence, their name is the forefront of the brand. And they can often be inundated with Instagram marketing, podcasts, emails, all these marketers that are like, if you do it this way, if you do it this way, if this strategy, this strategy, this strategy. And so my entire approach in our brand studio, Career Creative, the whole approach is based on I have a million strategies that work. But what is going to work for you? What's going to work for your nervous system? So my clients feel like they need a strategy. And oftentimes what they really need is to look at their approach. So it's not the strategy. Like they think, oh, if I could just get this strategy, then this would work. Then I would get the results that I want. But oftentimes it's really looking at the approach to getting that strategy. Because if you're outsourcing and you're looking for everybody else to give you answers, that approach is going to keep you in a loop of outsourcing, you know? And so I'm always like, what is the, even in messaging, what's the emotional in the branding? It's like, what is the approach? This psychological piece is so important because it's how we operate, whether we're the founder and the entrepreneur or whether we're or the business or whether we're the client or the customer. We're both operating from these psychological places that are influencing how we approach our work or our purchases. And understanding that is, I think, a key thing that's either missing or used as a manipulative tactic in a lot of.
Well, I love your answer. And let me tell you why I invited you on today. Because right now, as you know, AI is a big thing. I remember when search engine optimization was the big thing for businesses. Like, oh, how do you get your business to rank on the top page of Google for
Mhm.
your particular keywords? And the big gold rush, if you will, was how to do that. Well, the next level that I see coming is going to be people optimizing for AI. And AI is not going to give out 10 different businesses in your area that can do something like the first page of Google. At least I don't think it will. But anyway, I could be wrong. It happens. I think what's going to happen is people are going to be competing for that one or two recommendations and deep explanations from AI, telling them, if you want this, do that from this company. And that's going to be a lot of people competing for a very, very
Mhm.
minuscule opportunity. And the antidote that I see to that is branding. It's
Yes,
creating a feeling and an emotion and a recognition. I feel good about what they do, how they do it, how they present. I want to know more about whether or not this company can help me. So that's why I think branding is so important. I think it is going to become the antidote or the alternative way alternative way of being discovered in an AI generated marketing land.
for sure. And like you said, it's about creating a world, right? It's about creating an experience that people can enter because there's so much competition out there. So when you create a brand world that people can enter and they can feel something and they can have an experience versus just getting information, like this is what we do. Like I think a lot of times when I look at websites, they have this copywriting style that's like I do X to support Y in achieving Z. And that formula, I remember when I had coaching from back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, that's what it was. It was like, this is the statement, and how can you say this statement? And really now it's like people need so much more because there's so much social media, VR, AI. They want this sense of humanity. And that personality, whether it's an individual or brand personality, because I think of the brand as a living being that has its own personality that has been birthed or created, just like we have been birthed or created into being. So they have this unique, when you go to someone's house and you're like, I get you more now because I see your vibe and I feel you in your home differently than I experience you on the internet. And that's what your brand should do. It should invite people in to experience the brand world or your world in a way that makes it a place that they don't want to leave. And it's giving them the experiences that they've been longing to having that they haven't found elsewhere in other brands or other places.
I think the important thing to remember is that businesses aren't just competing with their competitor X, Y, and Z. They're competing with all of these other companies for the attention of their ideal prospects, period. My company isn't just competing with other companies that do what I do
Right.
for the attention
It's
of
attention.
it is.
Yeah, and
So
that's like one of our greatest resources to share with each other is our attention. Like having, when you have like whether it's someone in your family or a friend and you have their full attention, it's like we so rarely have that these days. So to have a client or customer's attention that's like, oh, there's so many distractions, so many things, and I'm giving it to you, that's a hot lead, not a warm lead.
what are some patterns that you see in organizations that fail to resonate with their audiences versus those that do it well? What are some of the differences?
I think that a lot of times one of the things that I see is really talking about yourselves as a brand, as a company. And I think that it's copywriting. It's like a subtle shift in phrasing and semantics that can shift things. But people, especially buyers, are very self-centric. They have a problem and they want a solution, and they're focused on the fact that this problem still exists and they want to know that they have a solution. So you can say, we do this and our company does this and we see these things, but they want to feel it from them. And I find more and more and more that copywriting wise, messaging wise, centering the client and painting the picture of the experience that they're having. And it's taking the same exact sentences of saying, we do this, and making it more of a world, painting a picture, giving sensory details that a reader or an audience can feel themselves in and put themselves in and see themselves as the hero, for lack of a better word, in storytelling as the hero of the journey instead of the company. And I think especially startups, they're so excited about what they're doing, even though it's service based, even though there is this mission to help and aid in some kind of problem, provide a solution for some kind of problem. It's very company centric. And we want to shift that to client centric, customer centric experience and painting the picture of what that we understand what their challenge is now, paint the picture of what they can expect when they work with us or use our product, and then paint the picture of what's going to happen afterwards. And that is storytelling. So I think a lot of the thing that's missing is storytelling, and it's a buzzword right now. Like everyone's saying
It
storytelling,
is.
but not really talking about what that really means. And I think companies are trying to kind of use these AI. It's one of the things that it's not, as someone who's written tons of clients' website copy for them, AI, it's not that great at doing that because it doesn't really understand this. It can kind of touch on a little bit of emotions, but it has this voice that's really just missing this human experience that really allows people to feel connected to. It really allows them to feel seen and heard. And it has this jargon and it's so repetitious and you can spot it from a mile away and everyone who's using it. And so I think, lack of storytelling and human connection, reliance on AI without the human copywriter to really understand the audience and understand the business well. So I think a lot of times people are either super focused on their own business and getting that foundation really clear, especially startups, or they're super focused on the audience. And it's always about the relationship between the two and how the two are impacting and serving and helping one another.
One of the things that I'm certain I'm not the only person thinking is if I own a business and I do great branding. Let's just say we've got the story, we've got the ecosystem, we've got the whole world around it together, emotional, everything's on point. There's that old saying, like, you have that beautiful billboard in the middle of the desert that no one sees.
Mhm.
What are your recommendations for businesses to get the attention of their ideal prospects when I, we live in such a world that's you got to be able to explain something instantly or convey an emotion instantly or grab curiosity instantly. You may have a great story to tell, but if you can't get their attention long enough to listen or to stay tuned long enough to hear the whole story, it's almost futile.
Mhm.
I'm sure that I'm not the first person to ask you that question. What are your thoughts?
There's a few things. One is that I think there's a difference between trying to grow an audience and trying to nurture the audience you have. And there are different phases that different companies meet at different times, and really knowing where you're at is really important because if you're not nurturing the audience you have and you're focused on trying to scale and get other people's attention and you're losing the audience that you have right in front of you because you're focused on this other piece when you're actually not ready for that business wise or brand wise, then I think that that's one of the first things I would look at. The second is art. I think business and branding is relational. And so the first thing is your branding relational? Is it creating a sense of relationship with your audience? It can be a product that does something so simple, like I have a candlestick here. It can be anything. How can you tell a story that is relational, visually and verbally, emotionally? And I think what's happening right now is there's a huge influx of skills that used to be specialty skills like cinematography. Now everyone on social media is expected to be able to make a real cinematographic. That's not the right word. There's too many syllables in there.
Notice I didn't jump in to try to help with that. I didn't know the right word either, so that's okay. But I know what you're getting at.
That quality of cinematography is something that is really accessible that you can do on apps that takes extra effort that might be outsourcing, that might be hiring someone on Fiverr for your team to get a certain level of quality that is actually being asked of us to compete with peers. Because it's things like that were specialty, and social media was intended to kind of be this everyday, just recording yourself. And even when it's simple, even when it's what works is just someone in their car recording themselves and that works, it still has to have strategy and storytelling and have some kind of thoughtfulness that is extra because everyone is competing at such a high level where all the technology gives us these skills that were one specialty, they're not. So everyone has to kind of up their game attention wise.
It's funny you said, like, I'm going to share this with the audience because you just struck something that I think may be helpful. Several years ago, I got the opportunity to meet Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank season 1. And he had a book out called Act Now. And obviously he's the kind of the father of infomercials.
Okay, yeah.
And one of the things that he did was he would go to trade shows and he would just watch for someone doing a presentation that could draw a crowd. I think he might have used the example he might have used might have been the Ginsu knives or something like that. But he's just like, you got this guy slinging knives and talking, and next thing you know, he's got this big crowd, and everyone's tuning in, literally crowding around to hear what this guy to say. And he just watched this guy do his thing, convey that emotion, do it in an entertaining and enthusiastic way. And next thing you know, people want to buy all the knives.
Hmm.
So he's like, well, gee, I could just make a video of that, get that in front of enough people. And oversimplifying, but the thing that he talked about was he literally pulled the phone out of his pocket and he said, I have sold billions of dollars of product using camera equipment that cost me millions of dollars that isn't as good as the camera that's sitting in your pocket right now. And that really hit home with me as far as the importance of storytelling. If you think of the Ginsu knives guy making, and I'm just using that as an example, making the presentation, hey, have you ever been here? Or have you ever had this problem? You ever been doing this or been doing that? Tried to figure out, oh no, I got people coming for dinner and what am I going to do? Whatever the story is. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the point is drew a crowd, had their attention and was able to do that. And it's, so I get it.
I love this example because it's relational. So, when you go to a restaurant and the chef is in the back and you can't see the kitchen and you can't see the people and you order and it all happens behind the scenes and somebody brings out your food. And then when you go to Hibachi Girl, and they're cooking in front of you and they're throwing the shrimp into your mouth to catch it. And like, that's relational. And you're having a totally different experience that honestly, even if the food isn't that good, it's memorable. You can have that experience once 10 years ago and remember it because there was interaction with the food, the server, the chef. There was so much more relational. Whereas you have this normally you're with your friends and family or on a date or with someone, and there's this outside person who comes in. Maybe there's a little small talk and then they leave, and everything's happening without you being a part of it. And so the more it's engaging, it's like taking a cooking class versus going and then eating the food with someone where you made it yourself. There's relational. And so that Ginsu knives, the guy at the trade show, he's relating with the audience. It's like street performers. They create a
Yes.
crowd because they're interacting with the people. They're not just on a bullhorn, hey, look over here, hey, look over here.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, ask any little kid what's their favorite pizza. They're not going to say Chuck E. Cheese. But if they want some fun and they want interaction,
Right.
that's where they want to go. Now, parents, not so much fun for the parents, but kids, it's an experience, it's an interaction, it's a brand that those little kids associate with fun and party and friends and activities. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to be hungry and pizza's okay. But I think that's in alignment with what you're talking about. So I know that you also work with leaders on both brand strategy and leadership development. How are these connected?
So I've been personally doing in my own personal brand leadership mentoring for 15 years. And then I founded a brand studio named Career Creative where we do holistic branding from messaging, visuals, websites, business and brand strategy. And so I've always kept this mentorship piece because I really believe the value of people creating things in the world, whether it's art, whether it's businesses, creativity, create. I think that's what we're here to do. And I also think it's a grave responsibility to create something. Like if you were to bring a child into this world, that is a huge responsibility. And I think when we're creating businesses, it's a huge responsibility. And so we might have the creativity and the inspiration and the will to bring it into form, but sometimes like parenting doesn't come with a manual. You're kind of learning as you go. And I think business is kind of the same way. It's teaching you as you go, especially if you're on the entrepreneurial path. And so the leadership piece is to me integral in anyone who's creating a business. Like I'm personally not helping the person who's drop shipping vape pens on Amazon. That's not my God bless. However you want to spend your time and your life and provide for your family and yourself is your business. But to me, I want people who have this deep care, this deep movement that they need to contribute, that they would be saddened about their life and their legacy if they didn't fulfill this mission. Those are the people I work with. So that leadership piece is just having someone in your corner, having a mentor, having an ally, having someone who's done it for a long time. And to just have a hand to hold and to support you and to reflect. And so my whole coaching mentorship approach is you have the answers. It's not to tell you, well, this is what I think you should do. It's to ask enough questions that you find your own answer yourself. Because I think that if you created this business, just like if you birthed a child, that parent knows what the child needs more than a stranger, more than a sleep coach, more than some kind of psychologist who works with child development, that the intimacy that a mother and child have, what's that podcast, the telepathy tapes with the kids who can, I don't know if you did, it was a big
I haven't
podcast
seen that
last year.
one.
Anyway, it's these kids who can psychically, who are autistic and nonverbal, and they psychically communicate with, they can't talk in the world, they're nonverbal, but they can communicate. And it's mostly with their primary caregiver, their parents, their primarily their mother. And they can hear her thoughts. There's all these tests, and these researchers kind of elicit all these tests to double check, like if she's reading a book over in the other room, and they can tell you the first line of it by typing. And so there's this connection from the creator and the creation, right? And there's this intimacy there that I think is really important, that as soon as you create the thing, then there's all these expectations. And we, as the kind of birther of our businesses, we have our own agenda sometimes. We want it to go a certain way. Like the same way you'd tell a kid, "Oh, you should be a lawyer." And it's like, "Well, what does the business want? What is the business unto itself? What is the legacy that it's leaving beyond our own ambition?" And so I think that this quality of relationality that I'm talking about with branding also exists with managing and running and starting a business. And so that to me is the leadership piece. Is like if you're going to throw your hat in the arena and create a business that's going to impact the world, it's important to have some accountability and to really take it as a big responsibility that requires us to reflect on ourselves as the leaders, to have time to be able to step away from our businesses and look at how we're growing it. Is the scalability that I'm trying to achieve congruent with my long-term goals, or is it just a short-term win to get a bunch of cash injection? Is it actually getting to the place that I want to get to? Is it actually allowing the business to leave the legacy it was here to build? And so for me, we're always looking at those things. It's kind of checkpoints. It's really that accountability of how are you running your business and is it giving you the outcome you want? So earlier I was saying how sometimes it's not the strategy, but the approach to the strategy. And so the leadership mentoring is really looking at that with a microscope, with a loving microscope. And
You know what vibe I'm getting from you?
yeah,
If I were, I'm going to take a stab at this, but you know how when people say, "Oh, it's not personal, it's just business," after they do something that is typically not nice
definitely
or not
personal.
helpful, what I hear from you is the exact opposite. "Hey, it's not business, it's personal." That that has a helpful, kind connotation, which is the exact opposite of the just,
Yeah. And that's how I want
"Hey,
my customers to feel. That's how
don't
I
be
want our
offended
clients to
because this is
feel.
just business." No, "Hey, I want you to be amazed because this is just personal." Taking a personal
I
approach
love
to
that.
business is
I
what I hear
love
you
that
say,
flip. Yeah, that's
because that's the
100%.
feel that I get from what you're telling me. It's I wanna shift from, "Hey, it's not just business, it's personal." That's a way different vibe and a way different feeling and a way different emotion than the way the opposite one generates the excuse for, "Hey, I just mistreated you. Don't take it personally. It's just business." That's the vibe that I'm getting from your answer, and
I love that.
thank you.
Yeah. You just threw me some you're great at messaging. You just gave me a whole new tagline.
Yeah, that's why we do these things. So, let me think of a different question. What about organizations that are trying to evolve their brand in a crowded market? What strategic first step should every company take when contemplating maybe a brand refresh, in your opinion?
Brand refresh, you talked about being in a crowded market. And I think one of the things is creating your own market. And all of that is positioning, all of that is messaging. It's something every business can do for themselves. It's you're actually informing the audience on what you are, where you lie in the market. They're not coming up with that conclusion themselves. So if you're a wellness brand, it can be broad, it can be wellness, or it can be very, very specific in a way where you have less competitors. So to me, that's messaging and positioning 101 is setting yourself apart if there is a saturated market, really differentiating, finding that factor that differentiates yourself. And specifically because I work with a lot of personal brands, people like yourself, people who have podcasts and businesses, they offer a service, but their face and their presence is what allows that service to sell often, is to really I'm like, what makes this unique? I do these messaging sessions and it's always my story and me. And I'm like, yeah, yes, that's going to be true for everyone everywhere. But what makes this really unique? It's not the founder's story. It's something underneath. And so I'm always really excavating this messaging positioning intersection for my clients in their brand is one of the primary things that we do to set them up so that there is so that people aren't saying, "Oh, there's so many businesses just like this." We do not want people to say that.
Right.
You of course there's competition. And the way that I want people to study competition to get more attuned to themselves, not more attuned to the other businesses and what they're doing and try to mimic and copy, but actually look at what other businesses are doing to come back to their own business and to look at how unique and different and what approach. And if what I find a lot of people doing is trying to mimic the person that they think is successful or the business that they think is successful.
That reminds me of one of my favorite books. Years ago, I read by Seth Godin, The Purple Cow.
Mhm.
Have you read that book?
I haven't read that one. I've
Okay,
heard of it.
so I can summarize it in about 30 seconds for
Great.
you and for the audience. He talked about traveling, and I'm gonna butcher it a little bit, but the general gist of it is he talked about traveling the countryside and he saw this brown cow grazing in the field, and he thought it was beautiful. He saw the sun coming over the mountains and reflecting in the dew in the grass like diamonds in the sunlight, and he's like, "Wow, what a beautiful view." It got his attention. He paid attention, he absorbed the moment. He said, but after driving the countryside, he'd seen hundreds of brown cows and they were all boring. They were all the same. Now, if you ask the cows, they all think they're unique, remarkable, and different, but they aren't. They're the same, i.e., businesses. The cows are the businesses. It was his analogy.
Mhm.
He goes, but what if there was a purple cow, a genetic freak of nature that was, let's say, grazing in the local park? Just no one ever seen anything like it. How long would it take for the word to travel like wildfire everywhere? I mean, you'd have helicopters flying above, you'd have news reporters, you'd have everybody with their cameras, it'd be going viral on social media worldwide. And why? Because something was so unique and remarkable that people couldn't help but to talk about it. He goes,
But it's
that's the
still a
concept of the
cow, it's still grazing, it's still doing all the same things, but it had this really unique factor that differentiated it. And sorry to say for businesses, a color in your brand story alone isn't gonna do that. It has to be from the messaging. It's a good addition when it stands out visually, but it's anyone can just throw a bright color in and do that. And more people do that, and then it becomes the norm.
So we talked earlier about the challenge of getting your brand out there and getting noticed with people being distracted and there's so much competition. There's another level that I wanted to ask your opinion on, and that's skepticism, trust. There's so much has been done to violate the trust. Gary Vee says marketers ruin everything. Sometimes they do, but but what what's your approach or your ideas or thoughts about combating the trust deficit?
Relational branding. I mean, building a relationship that is not just showing an attempt to create trust as a manipulation tactic, but actually building trust with an audience, with a client or customer base. And so that requires showing up, that requires conversations, that requires listening, that requires engagement with your audience in an impactful way. To me, that's the huge thing that's going to do that. The other thing is that, you know, a lot of people are triggered by that word marketing as entrepreneurs, and they just want to do what their business does. They just want to offer the service and they don't want to have to market. They don't want to have to do the accounting. And obviously you can outsource all these things that are not your zone of genius, but in the beginning a lot of people have to do all these things, and it's good. I think it's really important to learn how to do all these things yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. But there's this quality of trustability that is reflective in every step of how the business is run. So how do you treat your contractors? How do you treat yourself? How are you showing up? That trustability shows up everywhere, and a good business has those values that the brand stands for that people throw on their websites. That needs to be reflected everywhere. So if the person who's running the business values something and it shows up in their branding or their marketing, but it doesn't show up in how they treat their family, their children, their wife, and it's just in the business realm, like that to me is like one of the biggest things that I'm sensing, feeling, looking for when working with people is that quality of meeting someone and just going, wow, that's a good guy. That's a good you just feel it. You just know. And so because marketing has been so manipulative for so long and influencing people just to sell something and doesn't really care about the person, people have an ick around marketing. And what I do is shift marketing to sharing. Sharing is caring. You're just sharing your care. You're sharing your care for the client's experience, the customer's problem, the challenge that they're having, and you're sharing about the solution that you've created or founded or have developed or invented that you care about. You care about them. Marketing is just sharing. It's just sharing your deepest devotion to solving a problem. And when
It's
people feel the heart of it, they trust you more.
It's interesting you say that because I've been listening to a lot of I've read his books, Alex Hormozy's books,
Yeah,
and he's obviously got a huge presence on the internet and he tells stories. And what I like about his style and his approach is he doesn't need the money, number one, so his credibility's there. But two, he's like, what I'm telling you is not a sermon, it's a documentary. Like, this is what I did. This is what worked, this is what didn't work, and here's why. And I hope that some of this is helpful to you. He's not covering his scars, he's sharing them. He even says, he goes like, "Hey, look, I want you to get the lessons, not the scars." And he's open and authentic enough to be able to express them in a way that as someone who consumes his content, like I feel good about listening to him because he's just telling the story. He's not saying you have to do this or you have to do that. He's like,
exactly.
"Look, here's what I did. Here's what I learned. Hope it helps you." So, along that same vein, in your opinion, how do you balance authentic expression with strategic positioning in a way that feels both real and competitive?
I think every marketer, founder, entrepreneur has to find their own way at this. Like, I know there's certain things that would work best for my business that just aren't me. I know that they would convert well. I know that my audience would really appreciate if I did this. I know that it would get more people to have eyes. And it's just not, I'm not someone who has my phone with me all the time, almost ever. I'm not on a hike documenting it. And so I think that I'm more of an artist than a creator, and that actually works for my brand because people are hiring me as a creative director for their businesses with the whole branding suite that we offer. And so I like things a lot more curated. I would rather spend a day in a studio creating art and filming than like have my phone on me all the time. Do I think that the filming every day and sharing different pieces of my life would work better and have higher conversions? I do, but it's not authentic to me. So I have to find my balance of what is really authentic and what works in the industry. And the truth is, there's so many strategies. Knowing what works for your when I do business strategy sessions, we always start with goals. And there's four types of goals that we have: business goals, income goals, impact goals, and legacy goals, like long-term legacy, like what this business could do if it lived beyond you. And then when we move into the channels, which are your income streams in each thing that we're going to market, we're making sure that our short-term actions work towards our long-term goals, work towards the impact goals. And I think that a lot of people just focus on income goals and the impact of how their business could impact communities, people, customers in a bigger way
Absolutely.
is really important. And so I think it's like finding what works for your nervous system, what works for your family life. Like, how often do you really want to be working? Like, I could give you a strategy that you could implement that's going to be super successful if you're willing to do XYZ. It's like, oh, well, I'm not willing to do XYZ. These other things in my life are more important, and my family or whatever it is. And this strategy would ask me to sacrifice that. I think people have to get really right with themselves and look at what works for them. So when we create a strategy, I do about 12 to 18 months with people at a time. And hopefully it's something that can either rinse and repeat and or scale really easily, that they can kind of keep going on their own. But I always say it's something that they have to be in relationship with. They have to be looking at this strategy you can't just have it and forget it. You have to be looking at it every month rather, and look at, I bit off more than I could chew, or I actually am so inspired that I got all of this done and now I have more space to do this. All of that is feedback. You're collecting data. And so it's hardest to do strategy for a company that's a startup because they don't have any data that's collected. So I think one of the biggest things to answer the question that you're asking is collect data
Okay.
and actually look at it, because that data will inform how you move forward next time. And if you're not looking at the data in a really intricate, microscopic way, you're going to miss all these opportunities to tweak a dial slightly to get a different outcome the next time. And then if what happens is, I think people are then looking for a different strategy and like, oh, I need to redo this and I need to change this and I need a different strategy. And I heard about this thing that they're doing and this is working and I'm going to try that. And they don't stick with things and really refine and collect data. So to me, the strategies that have the most success are the ones that have the most mistakes and data collected that shows them how to do things differently.
That's something that you hinted on earlier in the conversation. I'm glad that you reemphasized that because people see, oh, here's this strategy, or I saw this on the YouTube,
Mhm.
or I saw this in an article, and hey, if it worked for them, it's going to work for me. And it's just like I usually hate when people use sports analogies like on football, but I'm going to go
Do
against my
it.
own better judgment here. But if I'm a coach and I'm calling the plays, there's all kinds of ways I can score. My strategy might be to run the ball every single time. My strategy might be to throw the ball. It might be to kick the ball. It might be to have my defense sack the opposing quarterback in the end zone. There's all kinds of different strategies that can work, just like you said earlier. But which one is the best for that? Which plays to the strengths of your team and where you are in the field and what your time constraints are. I mean, you can, like you said, you can score or win in any number of ways, but always be aware of what works best for you and your business and your situation and where you are and what your strengths are and where your opportunities for improvement are. You're not every other business. So what all these other businesses are doing, chasing what all these other businesses doing doesn't always make sense. I mean, sometimes you can get some ideas from them, but I appreciate that you have twice made the point about doing things that work for you and not
And
just
sticking
chasing
with them.
trends or chasing crowds. So thank you
Yeah.
for reemphasizing that.
Yeah.
If you could only give business owners one piece of your best advice, I know there's a lot that you know about branding, there's a lot of things that you could share. But if there was only one piece that you think is the most important piece of advice you could give to anybody, what would it be?
I get asked this at the end of every podcast, and I really need to like make a bank, like a little idea idea bank. Also, so I'm not saying the same thing every time. Let's see. I think that double down on intimacy sounds like counterintuitive to business, but intimacy with your brand, your business, your customers, your clients, the people who've gone through and moved through your products or programs, yourself as a business. Like if we spent a little 10% more time doing that, I think not only would the businesses thrive, but people wouldn't have so much of an ick with marketing, customers would have better experiences, more trust would be built, and all these things that we've talked about today. So it sounds really unbusiness-like and much more relational psychology to me. Double down on that, whatever it means to you. Take 5 minutes to I always say take your business out on a date. Ask
Okay.
curiosity. A good date is curious. It's asking questions. You're getting to know each other, and you're not just talking about yourself the whole time, you know? And so a business is like that too. It's like, "What's how was that launch for you?"
It's funny because we were talking offline that you're in Austin, Texas right now, and I think that's where Tim Ferriss is right now, and I love his books, but
Mhm.
he wrote the book 4 Hour Workweek for
Yeah.
those in the audience that didn't know. And one of my favorite quotes of his is, "If what you're doing isn't working, do the opposite." So if you're out there, "Oh, I'm pushing out advertising, I'm pushing out advertising, I'm pushing out advertising, I'm pushing out advertising." Oh, it's not working. Do the opposite. Become intimate with your clients and your customers.
Your ads will perform better, promise.
Imagine that. So I really appreciate the time. I've got lots of insights and reminders from our conversation today. I genuinely appreciate every bit, every moment of your time. If people want to learn more about you, the work you do, and your company, what are the best ways for them to connect with you and
Yeah,
learn
thanks,
more?
Mason, for having me on. I really enjoyed being here with you today and your audience. LunaLoveLeadership.com is my website. You can check out the Brand Studio Career Creative through
Could you say
there.
that one more time? That was a little fast.
Yeah, LunaLoveLeadership.com. And then Luna Battalia on Instagram. And you can find me on all the social medias through Luna Battalia as well.
Cool. Do you have any special programs or anything that's going on that you're excited to share with anybody?
Yeah, we talked a lot today about messaging, and I have this course, my foundational course, that it's what I've taken from 15 years of working with entrepreneurs and doing high ticket messaging and copywriting with clients and boiled it down into a self-paced program that you can move through yourself, whether you're starting something new, already have a business established. And so it's called Messenger, the Master of the Art of Being Heard. And your audience can get 10% off with the code Mason.
Cool.
And you can
Thank you.
check that out.
I appreciate it. I'm sure they will too. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm sure you'll give them the links or put it in the show notes.
Sure.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and let's stay in touch and do this again soon.
Thanks so much, Mason.